Now, in recent weeks, Australians have been told to delay dishwasher use and stop using too much electricity after 3 o'clock in the afternoon or risk blackouts. This is ludicrous for 21st century Australia to have to ration electricity, and it's only as summer is just beginning. Now, of course, this is a self-inflicted crisis. We're an energy-rich nation, but we're exporting gas while struggling for our own supply across the country. Well, a world-leading stockbroker has bravely gone public to strongly criticise the Energy and Climate Change Minister, Chris Bowen. And I'm joined now by the man himself, prominent and well-respected stockbroker, Angus Aitken. Angus, great to see you here in Sky. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Sharri.
Now, we're facing blackouts this summer. We're paying more for the privilege. How do you think Chris Bowen has handled the energy supply in Australia?
I always think arrogance and stubbornness are two shocking traits in life. And in our listed companies, we always avoid companies where they think there's arrogance, they won't listen to anyone's opinion. And Chris Bowen is that in the political world. He will not listen to any other opinion other than his own views. And so far, the way we look at it in this energy transition, all he's done is create less reliable baseload power and significantly higher energy prices for the average Australian.
I mean, as you point out in a note to investors where you first went public with all of this, I mean, you compare Chris Bowen to a fund manager where the stock price has gone down by 90%, but he's still out there saying the market is wrong and not him. I mean, how ignorant do you think he is?
I think he's up there in terms of the most stubborn politicians behind the Malcolm Turnbulls and Kevin Rudds, and we know how those sort of political careers ended. But, you know, he's going against some of the smartest minds in the world. He's very against nuclear. Doesn't mean we need giant nuclear plants here tomorrow, but to go against the Bill Gateses, the Jeff Bezoses and these type of hyper-successful technology investors, the best, smartest people in the world over the last 30 years, what makes Chris Bowen smarter than those people? Nothing.
Exactly. And also we're seeing more than 30 countries around the world have nuclear as part of their energy mix. Yet the Albanese government is running this line that we shouldn't even go there in Australia. I mean, voters aren't going to buy the scare campaign, are they?
Sharri, I just can't believe we're a G20 member. That means you're a member of the 20 largest economies in the world. And Albo was in Rio the other day. I'm pretty sure he wasn't telling the other delegates there about turning off the kettle and your dishwasher at night. It's an embarrassment. But Chris Bowen, you know, I was looking through his declaration of interest. The guy received a number plate from Tim Walz and declared it. I mean, getting something from the Minnesota government, you know, a guy like that shows you're a complete loser in life, and that's Chris Bowen through and through.
I mean, so ultimately what we've seen in Australia is a rush to renewables and at the same time a failure to invest or to extend the life cycle of coal-fired power plants. But the reality is, whether we like it or not, and, you know, some viewers might not like it, but the reality is, at the moment, to keep the lights on, we still need coal. Yeah,
I was in America last week for work, and the average American cannot believe a resource-rich country like Australia. We produce 4 times as much gas as we consume, and we're talking about importing gas into Australia. Just think about that. Like a 9-year-old at school could understand that makes no sense. Coal-fired power, just before we came on air, it's 70% of the New South Wales power grid at this time of the day. There is zero solar. So for Chris to say it should be zero in 4 or 5 or 6 years' time, it is an impossible task, because you think about the scale of the batteries that you need to make up for 70% of the power grid at this time of day, in this peak power period. So we just see he's rushing it. We've got nothing against renewables. There's a role for renewables. It's just the pace of it is what we're saying is madness, and he will not listen to economic common sense, and that's what worries us for the Australian economy.
And also they've been keeping secret their targets for 2035 as well, which is kind of extraordinary.
Well, Sharri, if you talk to anyone in the energy sector, like the biggest players, they don't like to say stuff publicly for fear of the government shooting their head off and that sort of thing. They all know these targets are totally unachievable. You talk to any major power retailer, gas producer, none of these targets are achievable. Only Chris Bowen is sticking to them. The transmission, when you're driving through the countryside and you see the big old power transmission lines, some of them are 50, 60, 70 years old. You know, we've underinvested in this infrastructure for decades. You cannot just turn all this solar and wind on out in the middle of nowhere and have a stable grid. And that's what Bowen will never admit publicly.
I mean, it's putting ideology, let's face it, putting ideology above reliability.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you look at, as I keep coming back to that stubbornness of nuclear against gas. Gas is the way we can totally change this economy. We have abundant gas resources. We could find, you know, there's the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territory. That's the size of Bass Strait. It'll be developed and it'll be huge for the Australian economy. You know, there's so many ways we can solve this, but to me, us importing gas is as stupid as the Saudis importing oil. Think how moronic that would be. That's what Chris Bowen's got us to.
It's insane. It really is. I mean, you think Chris Bowen, do you remember at the last federal election or the 2019 election that Bill Shorten lost? It was considered the unlosable campaign. Chris Bowen was then in the Treasury portfolio. He took these most radical tax proposals to the Australian public and he said, if you don't like them, don't vote for us. And Australians chose not to vote for him. I think once again he might play a role, along with other ministers like Penny Wong, in seriously turning Australians off the Albanese government, causing them to vote for Peter Dutton, who has put forward a nuclear energy plan. And you'd have to think, I mean, would you put Chris Bowen in charge of running a school fete?
No, I think it'd go bankrupt. You know, even a sausage sizzle for Chris Bowen. He is totally incompetent. And the problem we've got here is the further we go down this path, the harder it is to change. And there is no shortage of energy or natural resources in this country. It is just they have to encourage these big companies to invest and have certainty, not demonise the gas industry, the coal-fired power industry and these sort of things. That is what we need, is less of a pile on these major current energy producers and this pressure to go to renewables. You know, and you think about his promise with Albo, $275 off your power bill at the election. You're now up about 700. So it's the reverse. So this idea of lower prices is just not achievable, to do with this renewable revolution of Chris.
It was a complete fantasy, let alone a broken promise. Well, I understand you've put a gas-fired generator in your garage, so if there's blackouts at summer, we're all coming
Sharri,
to your house.
I'm not a doomsday prepper, but I know there's blackouts coming in the next 5 years, thanks to Chris. And just remember, people with no history in private enterprise don't make good politicians. Chris has zero experience.
Right, well, we'll all be at your house when there's a blackout over summer.
You're welcome.
Angus, thank you so much for your time.
Sharri.
Really appreciate it.